The city of Tulsa thought it had seen everything, but then Dwight arrived. A man who carries silence like a weapon and walks through chaos as if it were his second home. Wherever he goes, eyes turn, rooms freeze, and enemies start counting there. Last options, this isn't just one man's story. This is Dwight. Against everyone, he steps into Tulsa with nothing but time lost and a world that has already changed without him. He is not just a stranger here, he is an old lion released into a new jungle. His clothes are sharp but his face is sharper, marked by years of loyalty, prison walls, and battles that would break lesser men. In this world of fast money, weak loyalties, and loud mouths, Dwight is a living echo of another age. He doesn't shout to be heard, he doesn't rush to make a point. He simply walks into a room, and the weight of his presence speaks louder than any gun. People in Tulsa didn't expect him to last a week. They saw an old man, fresh out of prison, trying to step into a city that was never his. But Dwight doesn't need Tulsa to welcome him. He doesn't need permission, approval, or an invitation. He takes what he wants, not with reckless anger but with a slow and steady patience that terrifies the people who face him. They see a man who is not desperate for money or respect because he already owns both in his mind. What Dwight craves is control, a control that comes not from screaming orders, but from showing others that no matter how much they resist, they will bend to his rhythm. Every move he makes feels calculated, as if he is playing a game the rest of the world doesn't even understand. He buys loyalty with fear and fear with kindness, switching between the two so smoothly that no one can predict which side of him they will face. One moment, he is calm, offering advice like a teacher. The next, his stare alone makes men stumble over their own words, and when Dwight decides to act, there is no hesitation. He doesn't give warnings twice. He doesn't repeat himself. In a city that runs on quick talk and empty threats, he's a man of action, and that makes him dangerous. But Dwight is not just a fighter of men, he is a fighter of time. 25 years stolen behind prison bars shaped him into something harder than steel. He missed the world-changing phones, the internet, new rules of business. Yet when he steps out, he doesn't look lost. Instead, he adapts like a soldier dropped into foreign land. He doesn't care about learning every detail of modern life. All he needs to know is one thing: power is still power, and fear still makes men kneel. The rules of survival never change, and Dwight plays by the oldest ones. What makes him terrifying isn't his fists, though he knows how to use them. It's not even the gun he sometimes carries. What makes him terrifying is his mind. Dwight knows people, their greed, their weakness, their hunger. He knows how to read silence, how to push the right buttons, how to twist a deal in his favor without ever raising his voice. He doesn't need to prove himself through long speeches or flashy moves. His presence is the proof, and in Tulsa, where everyone is busy pretending to be strong, Dwight shows them what real strength looks like. He is a ghost of the old mafia world, walking among men who never met his kind before. And while they laugh, while they underestimate him, Dwight waits. He listens, he studies, and when the time comes, he strikes with precision. His enemies never see it coming because they confuse age with weakness, patience with hesitation, silence with surrender. Dwight is none of these things. Dwight is the storm you never see until it's already above your head. Tulsa quickly learns that Dwight is not here to fit in. He is here to take over, not through chaos alone, but through respect, fear, and the kind of authority that doesn't need to be explained. Because Dwight doesn't ask for respect. He demands it without saying a word, and if you don't give it, then you join the long list of people who thought they could stand against him and found themselves broken. The first thing Tulsa learned about Dwight was simple: he doesn't back down. Not from gangsters, not from locals, not from anyone who thinks they can test him. Every new city has its predators, and Tulsa was no different. Young men with fast cars, quick mouths, and empty confidence tried to corner him, thinking he was just another outsider. But the problem with predators is they never recognize when they've just met a bigger one. Dwight didn't raise his voice. He didn't even move fast. He let them circle, let them spit out their threats, let them laugh at the old man who dared to step into their territory. And then, in a heartbeat, he showed them what 25 years of survival really looks like. One swing, one shove. One line that cuts deeper than any blade. That's all it took. Tulsa's predators became prey. Confrontations followed him like shadows. A crooked dealer who thought he could cheat Dwight out of money found himself staring at a man who didn't negotiate with lies. A gang boss who believed in numbers soon discovered that numbers mean nothing when fear spreads faster than loyalty. Dwight didn't need an army, he needed only his presence. Because once people saw him stand tall against the so-called kings of the city, they understood. This man doesn't flinch, he doesn't fold, he doesn't beg. He bends the world around him until it fits his will. What made these confrontations unforgettable wasn't just the violence. It was the silence before. Dwight had a way of letting the air grow heavy, of letting his opponents dig their own graves with their words. They would insult him, underestimate him, call him washed up. And he would just stand there, still as stone, until their laughter felt too loud in their own ears. Then he would step forward, slow and steady, and all the confidence in the room would vanish. The fight was already over before it began. Sometimes the battle was not with fists, but with words. Dwight had a talent for breaking men down without touching them. A sharp sentence, a stare that never blinked, a pause that made every second feel like a verdict. He reminded them of their weakness, their fear, their desperation. And the worst part, he was never wrong. He saw right through people, tearing away the masks they wore, exposing the cowardice they tried to hide. Men who shouted at him 1 minute found themselves stuttering the next. Confrontation wasn't just his weapon, it was his language. But Tulsa didn't just test Dwight with enemies, even his allies weren't safe. He confronted them too when they stepped out of line or forgot who they were standing beside. To Dwight, loyalty was not a favor, it was the law. And when someone close to him wavered, he made it clear, betrayal is not forgiven, weakness is not tolerated. These moments were often the hardest because Dwight didn't enjoy hurting his own people, but he did it anyway, because in his world, respect comes first, and anything less than loyalty is war. The beauty of these confrontations was in the balance between chaos and control. Dwight could be brutal, yes, his fists spoke loudly when needed. But more often than not, he didn't have to touch anyone at all. He let others destroy themselves by underestimating him. He let them trip over their arrogance while he stayed. Grounded, patient, unshaken. That was his real strength. Violence was only the punctuation mark. The real sentence was written in fear, respect, and the knowledge that Dwight would never be the one to fall back. And so the city began to change. With every confrontation, Dwight carved out his place in Tulsa. Each fight wasn't just about survival. It was about building his empire. One enemy down meant another door opened. One rival silenced meant his name spread louder. He didn't just win battles. He turned them into stepping stones, climbing higher with every clash. The locals whispered about him in bars. The gangs debated whether to challenge him or bow down. And the streets began to carry his shadow died in Tulsa. Everyone wanted to test the man who didn't belong. But Dwight taught them the same lesson, over and over again. It doesn't matter how many come against him. It doesn't matter how loud they roar. In the end, he stands and they fall. That is the rhythm of confrontation. That is the law of Dwight. Not every battle Dwight fought was with fists or guns. Some of his greatest victories were shaped long before anyone threw a punch. They were born in the way he thought, in the code he carried with him like a shadow. To outsiders, he was just a mobster, a man of crime. But to Dwight, he was something more, a man of rules, his rules, old rules. The kind of rules most people in Tulsa had forgotten or never even knew. In a world obsessed with shortcuts and easy money, Dwight believed in something different: respect, discipline, patience. To him, these weren't fancy words, they were survival. Respect kept men alive in prison. Discipline kept chaos from eating the soul. Patience turned small opportunities into empires. Dwight's philosophy wasn't soft or poetic, it was forged in cold nights behind bars, when betrayal and violence were as common as breathing. Every scar on his body was proof that the rules worked, that they protected him when nothing else did. One of Dwight's strongest beliefs was that respect can never be begged for. It must be earned, and once earned, it must be protected. He never asked anyone to like him, but he demanded that they respect him. That's why he never shouted for attention, never wasted time trying to look tough. Real strength, he believed, was quiet. It was the kind of strength that didn't need to announce itself. People could feel it in the room, the same way you can feel a storm before the rain. Loyalty was another pillar of his code. For Dwight, loyalty was sacred. He gave it without hesitation, but he demanded it in return. When someone stood with him, he stood with them, no matter the cost. But when someone turned their back, Dwight didn't forgive. Betrayal wasn't just a mistake, it was a death sentence. His years behind bars had shown him that betrayal is like a disease. Let it spread once, and it infects everything. Cut it off early, and the body survives. That was his philosophy. Cold, perhaps, but honest. Yet Dwight was not a mindless brute. He had his own sense of honor. He didn't hurt people for no reason. He didn't destroy without purpose. Every action had meaning. If he struck a man, it was to send a message. If he built an alliance, it was to strengthen his empire. Even in violence, there was order. That's why people couldn't quite label him. Was he a villain, a hero, a monster? To Dwight, those labels didn't matter. What mattered was results. You either had power or you were crushed by it. Dwight also believed that silence was often more powerful than words. He wasn't a man who wasted time explaining himself. If someone didn't understand his meaning, he let them learn the hard way. Words could be twisted, but silence forced people to think, to fear, to fill in the gaps themselves. And often, their imagination punished them harder than Dwight ever could. That was his genius, knowing when to speak and when to let silence do the talking. His philosophy was not built for comfort. It was built for survival. He knew the world would never give him peace. He knew every step forward meant another challenge waiting. But Dwight didn't crave peace. He thrived in war. To him, life was not about avoiding conflict, but mastering it. You don't run from fire. You learn how to walk through it without burning. That's why Tulsa, with all its chaos, was the perfect place for him. A city filled with young wolves, loud cowards, and greedy kings, exactly the kind of world where his rules would shine the brightest. And while others doubted him, Dwight never doubted himself. His philosophy was simple, but it made him unbreakable. Respect above love, loyalty above money, action above words, silence above noise. Tulsa was still learning these rules, but soon enough, everyone who crossed him understood. Dwight wasn't just another player in the game. He was the game. He didn't live by their rules. They lived or died by his. The city never expected the storm to grow this fast. One moment, Dwight was just another outsider, a shadow stepping into Tulsa with nothing but a sharp suit and colder eyes. But then the walls started to shake. Every day, every night, someone else tried him, and every time, they walked away broken. The intensity rose like a wildfire, and the more people tried to control it, the faster it spread. It began with the small-time hustlers, the ones who thought they could play games with Dwight. They mocked him, they doubted him, they called him old school. And yet, when the smoke cleared, it was their blood on the pavement, their pride scattered across bar floors. Dwight didn't go looking for trouble, trouble came to him. Again and again, and every time he showed Tulsa that age had made him sharper, not weaker. His hands still knew how to break bones, his words still knew how to break spirits, but what shook the city wasn't just his ability to fight. It was the way he did it, calm, calculated, like a man swatting flies. While others screamed, Dwight stayed silent. While others panicked, he waited for the perfect moment. When the first punch landed, it was always his, and it was always final. Watching Dwight handle chaos was like watching a man pour gasoline on a fire, not to destroy it, but to prove he could control the flames with his bare hands. The confrontations escalated. A crowded bar turned into a battlefield, with chairs flying and fists crashing into faces. Dwight stood at the center of it, untouched, as if the violence bent around him instead of against him. A street standoff ended with him walking away while everyone else stayed frozen in fear, realizing too late that this man wasn't playing by their rules. Even the police, even the gangs, even the so-called big bosses of Tulsa began to whisper his name differently. Not as a joke, not as an old man past his time, but as a storm that could not be stopped. The intensity wasn't just physical. Dwight's words cut sharper than any blade. A single stare from him silenced entire rooms. A single line, delivered without emotion, carried more weight than 1,000 threats. Men who bragged about their power, their guns, their money, found themselves stripped bare in front of him. He didn't shout them down, he broke them with truth. The kind of truth that exposed their fear, their weakness, their false courage. In those moments, it wasn't fists they feared. It was the realization that Dwight could see them for what they really were, cowards hiding behind noise. And as the weeks passed, the city began to change around him. His enemies were no longer just punks in bars or dealers on corners. Bigger fish started circling. Leaders of gangs, men who thought they ran the streets, men who believed Dwight was just another challenger. They came with guns, with threats, with armies of loyal soldiers. But none of it mattered. Dwight stood alone, and somehow that was enough. Every battle became bigger, louder, more dangerous. But with each victory, his shadow grew taller. Tulsa was no longer laughing. Tulsa was watching. What made the intensity unbearable for his enemies was that Dwight never seemed to tire. Most men fought one battle and needed rest. Dwight fought a dozen and came back sharper. The city threw everything at him, knives, fists, betrayal, gunfire, but every attempt only made him harder. The pressure didn't break him, it built him. With every confrontation, his legend grew. With every enemy that fell, the myth of Dwight became reality. Soon, it wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about dominance. Dwight didn't want a piece of Tulsa. He wanted the whole city to understand who they were dealing with. He wanted them to know that the old ways still ruled, that discipline and respect would always outlast noise and chaos. And so, he pushed harder. The fights became bloodier, the words became sharper, the silence became heavier. Dwight had arrived, and now Tulsa belonged to him, whether they liked it or not.